Okay, let's see. Okay, we should be, let me check. Yep, okay. For the record, this is position 6 on my calendar and position 18. State of Georgia versus Quitavious. Well, let's bring up Mr. Quitavious Carter and Mr. Alberto Gomez.
Your Honor, Alberto Gomez is present.
Thank you.
Do you want?
I don't want Mr. Gomez's image to be shown because he's a juvenile. Mr. Gomez, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Because you're a juvenile, I'm not going to allow your image to be shown in public. But you're here being represented by Mr. Stanley Schoolcraft. And I want you to understand that this proceeding is not about your guilt or innocence. It's about whether there is sufficient evidence available to move this case to the next stage, which is the Superior Court of Clayton County. So primarily, the questions that are going to be asked of Detective Bastier about his investigation. So this isn't a point to try, or it's not a stage to try to, for you necessarily to speak, because the state has the burden of proving their case beyond a reasonable doubt at trial. Do you understand me, sir?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Okay, so for the record, State of Georgia versus Quitavious Carter. Mr. Carter is present. He's charged in warrant number 2022 CW 52007 with committing the offense of murder. He's also charged in warrant number 2022 CW 52008 with committing the offense of the use of a communications facility to violate the law. He's charged in warrant number 2022 CW 52009 with committing the offense of criminal attempt to violate, looks like Georgia Controlled Substance Act. Mr. Carter is being represented by attorney Javaric Rogers. Mr. Alberto Gomez is charged in position number 18, also with committing the offense of murder. That charge is found in warrant number 2022 CW 52004. He's charged again with committing the offense of use of communications facility to violate the law. He's charged, and that charge is warrant number 2022 CW 52005, and he's charged finally in warrant number 2022 CW 52006 with the offense of criminal attempt to violate the Georgia Controlled Substance Act. The state is here represented by attorney Cheryl Freeman, who is also present. Ms. Freeman, would you swear in your witness and present your case?
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Fastier, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you're about to provide in the matter of Guatavius Carter and Gilberto Gomez will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Please tell us your name and how you're employed.
My name is Detective Bastier. I'm employed by Clayton County Police Department. I work in the Criminal Investigative Division. I've been employed with the department for approximately 5 years.
Detective, were you assigned the case to investigate involving the death of a Jair Ruiz Mancera?
Yes, ma'am.
Was this the result of an incident that allegedly occurred on February 22nd, 2022?
Yes, ma'am.
Please tell us what your investigation revealed that happened on that date.
Yes, ma'am. The victim ultimately was shot and killed during what appeared to be the sale of marijuana. This detective obtained search warrants for communications devices, communications records, Instagram records, etc., and was able to determine that the suspects were present at the incident location at the incident time when the victim was shot and killed.
If you can, Detective, what was the incident location and time?
The incident location was on Bear Paw Trail in the Hunter Ridge Mobile Home Park in Jonesboro, Clayton County, Georgia. The approximate time of the offense was about one. I believe it was about 5 after 1.
How many times was the decedent shot?
I believe he was shot twice.
Detective, you talked about you got a search warrant for some communication devices. What information were you able to learn from those devices?
In regards to the suspects, one of the suspects actually deleted communications with the victim when he was going ahead and offering to buy marijuana from the victim. The other suspect asked him to come out to the whip. Whip would be a slang term for ride. When the victim exited his residence on Bear Paw Trail, he went and had a conversation with the driver of the vehicle. He went back into his house, exited with some type of package or something in his hand. The vehicle during this time backed up to what they believed where they were off camera. When the victim returned to the vehicle, two suspects exited the vehicle, and the driver's side rear passenger shot at least 3 rounds, striking the victim what I believe was twice. The victim then ran to his house on his front doorstep and collapsed, where sometime later he was found deceased by friends.
Detective, you referred to the individuals, the suspects. Were you able to determine who those suspects were?
Yes, through phone records, Mr. Carter, his phone and phone records through GPS location placed him in the incident location at the incident time. And also the text message that he sent asking the victim to come to the vehicle. Mr. Gomez had several Instagram communications with the victim. And also he went ahead and was also placed at the incident location at the approximate incident time.
You mentioned some kind of video. Were there cameras at this location?
Yes, ma'am. We during the search warrant of the victim's residence, we seized a DVR, and with that DVR, we again obtained a search warrant for the DVR. There is video of the vehicle and actually basically the whole incident, the whole shooting of the victim.
Were there cameras located at the victim's residence?
Yes, ma'am.
Has that video surveillance been placed into evidence?
Yes, ma'am, I believe so.
Were you able to determine from the video, detective, I believe you said that shots came from inside the vehicle?
No, ma'am. The suspect exited the vehicle.
Okay, I apologize. Were you able to see, or could you tell who that suspect was?
Only in terms of physical characteristics, not anything that would allow me to identify the suspect.
Were you able to determine how many people were inside of the vehicle who arrived at the victim's residence?
Yes, ma'am. It appears with the video that there were 4 people inside a stolen red Honda SUV.
Were there any other witnesses to this incident that you were able to speak to?
No, ma'am.
Have you since been able to interview Mr. Cortavius Carter about this incident?
Yes, ma'am. I did interview Mr. Carter, and Mr. Carter did admit to being there when the victim was shot and was in the vehicle.
Have you been able to interview Mr. Gomez about this incident?
Yes, ma'am.
And what statement did Mr. Gomez provide?
Mr. Gomez did admit that he was going to meet the victim for a transaction for marijuana. Did admit that he does sell marijuana and contraband at school, but denied being present at the shooting.
Just so we're clear, Detective, regarding Mr. Gomez, were you able to determine that he was at the location at that time based on his cell phone?
That is correct. His cell phone records, yes, ma'am. And he did admit to being at the location, just not when the victim was shot.
Have you been able to locate the firearm that was used to shoot Mr. Mancera?
No, ma'am.
After the shooting, detective, does the video show what the suspects did?
Yes, the suspects, 3 suspects in the vehicle drove away rapidly, driving off camera. The one male suspect that had the firearm in his possession and shot the victim did run in between, did run away on foot, and is believed later to have rejoined the vehicle.
Was the vehicle located?
Yes, ma'am, it was. It was located at Independence Park off Thomas.
Did you find any type of identifying information of any of the suspects in that vehicle?
No, ma'am. The vehicle was actually recovered 2 to 3 days later. And at the time that it was recovered, the vehicle had not been identified as the vehicle used in this crime.
Did all of this take place in Clayton County?
Yes, ma'am, it did.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Sorry, I was talking to myself. We'll go to Mr. Rogers first and then Mr. Schoolcraft.
Detective, few questions for you. Just want to make sure I'm clear. The video that you were discussing that you said actually captured the shooting, what's the source of that video?
It is the victim's CCTV system or video system.
And a couple of questions about the passport. You said that there were 4 people in the passport. Let me not assume that's a passport. I'm assuming that because it's a red Honda SUV. But the red Honda SUV, you said there were 4 people inside of it.
That's what appears from the video. Yes, sir. That's what I believe.
And are you able to identify the faces of people in the vehicle or just the number of people?
I've already stated that I cannot identify people based on the video, sir. Just the physical characteristics of the people, especially the people that exited the vehicle during the shooting.
How many people exited the video during the shooting?
The rear driver's side and passenger side both opened up their doors as if they were getting out. The individual on the driver's side fully exited the vehicle. The passenger side individual did not fully exit the vehicle because the vehicle started to move away after after the shots rang out.
And when you say that you were able to offer physical descriptions of the occupants of the vehicle, how are you able to do that as far as what is the reference point that lets you estimate heights, things of that nature?
Well, when the suspect was out of the vehicle, I know that the approximate height of the vehicle, I can see that it appears to be a male. By his physical stature, I can pretty much, relatively guess his weight, or, conclude what his weight, ascertain what his weight might be is a better way to, I guess, phrase it. So basically, you can tell it is a black male subject with an approximate height and approximate weight.
I don't know if it's just on my end, but you kind of cut out at the end there. Last thing I heard was an approximate height.
I'm sorry, sir. Say again.
I was saying that I don't know if you were done or if it just cut out towards the end there, but you were saying that you could tell an approximate height or weight, but I don't know, was at the end of what you were saying?
Yes, yeah, you can tell it. You can see it's a black male, and you can see you can ascertain the approximate height and weight, and that he's running with a firearm.
What about the height and weight? What would you estimate? What would your estimates on that?
What I did, sir, is that they were approximately the same height, if not a little bit taller than the vehicle. I went ahead and researched the vehicle. The vehicle gave me an approximate height. Looking at the size of the individual, I went ahead and ascertained that they weren't slender. They were more of an average size. They weren't slender, and they definitely weren't, on the hefty side.
You may not have heard exactly. Maybe it didn't come clearly what I was asking. I was asking what was the height that you ended up estimating the person at?
Approximately 6 feet.
Okay. And as far as the person who gets out on the passenger side, were you able to make similar estimations about that person?
Not really, because you can, in my opinion, you can tell that it's a black male, but I'm not fully able to tell height or weight because they don't fully exit the vehicle. They just basically open up the door like they're getting out, and then that's when the vehicle departs rapidly.
And I know there's been discussion of the video being recovered and in law enforcement possession. Is there any other physical evidence or anything that's been taken into possession as far as DNA or fingerprints or anything of that nature related to?
Shell casings were recovered.
And as far as the shell casings recovered, are they all one caliber or what's the situation?
The one caliber, I believe.
And at any point, does the decedent, do they ever present a weapon or fire any shots or anything, to your knowledge?
No, the victim never appears to have a weapon.
And as far as the conversation that you spoke of, you had with, I believe it was, I think you said you spoke Mr. Carter and Mr. Gomez. Are those the only two people that you've interviewed regarding this case?
The case is still under investigation. I'm still trying to ascertain who the other suspects are. Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. So you're saying at this point, though, those are the only two people that you've interviewed regarding the case of Mr. Carter and Mr. Gomez?
Yes, at this point.
But you are still seeking to investigate further. Understood.
I'm sorry. Say again.
I was saying, but you are still seeking to investigate further to question.
Oh, the case. Yes. Yeah. The case is open, and I'm still investigating. Yes.
And the conversation that you had with Mr. Carter, what was the circumstances of that? Had he been arrested at that point?
Yes.
And where did the conversation take place?
Clayton County Police Headquarters in CID.
And I don't want to presume, was it recorded?
Yes, audio and visually.
And was Miranda administered beforehand?
Yes, it was, and he signed a statement of Miranda rights.
Is that on video too, the Miranda part?
Yes, it is.
No further questions at this time.
Any follow-up, Ms. Freeman?
No, Your Honor, not at this time.
Okay, Mr. Sorry, and I just totally skipped over you.
I understand.
Ms. Schoolcraft, you can ask whatever questions you need to ask of Detective Bastier.
Thanks, Judge. Detective, what was the time of this incident again?
I believe it was approximately shortly after 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay. When you describe the physical aspects of one of the suspects as being 6 feet tall, was that the shooter?
Yes, sir, it was.
Okay. And can you tell me, you interviewed Mr. Gomez. How tall is he in your estimation?
Yes, he's quite a bit shorter. He's I believe it's like 5'7", 5'8".
So it's clear he's not the shooter.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, can you tell me the Instagrams that you found from Mr. Gomez, between Mr. Gomez and the victim? Is that what they were? Instagrams between the two
Yes,
of them? What time
yes,
were
they were
they?
Instagram
What time were
messages.
they? What time were these Instagrams?
Just prior to the incident.
And can you tell me just prior? 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 5 minutes?
Yeah, 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay. And you don't have any evidence then of who was in the car except the 6 foot tall shooter?
That's correct.
Okay. So you have no idea whether Mr. Gomez was in the car at all?
No, I don't. I can tell you that he said he was at the incident location, and his phone records do place him there at the incident location at the approximate incident time. He deleted communication with the victim because he did not want that communication to be noticed, which is similar to fleeing from police. It's it can be taken as a sign of guilt. He did admit to going ahead and doing previous narcotics dealings with the victim, and as I said, he denies being there for the shooting.
Okay.
But that's not what the electronic evidence at this point shows.
Okay. So basically, all you have right now is that his phone was in the vicinity, and he said he was present near the scene. True?
Correct.
Okay. And it's clear, was it the driver that got out and shot the victim?
No, it was the driver's side passenger, the rear door,
Okay.
sir.
And that was the person that was 6 feet tall.
Correct. Approximately.
Okay. And there's no other witnesses, no other people can testify as to who was there, when they were there, or anything like that?
That is correct.
Okay. That's all I have, Judge.
Okay, I'll start with you, Mr. Rogers. Are you going to present any evidence?
No, sir, Your Honor, just argument.
Mrs. Schoolcraft, are you going to present any evidence?
No, Judge.
Okay, Detective Bastier, you are free to go, or you could stay here. Is that your pleasure? Ms. Freeman,
Thank you, Your Honor.
you're welcome. Is it your intent to waive opening?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Rogers.
Thank you. Your Honor, I guess I'll point out that I understand the allegations or the information related to Mr. Carter allegedly being on the scene at the time of the incident. However, I will point out that mere presence is insufficient to connect someone to a crime. In this case, there's been no discussion that Mr. Carter is supposed to have been playing any part in any sort of weed transaction or anything like that. He's not alleged to be a weed seller, not financing, anything like that I've heard. So there's really no connection to him to any felony. He hasn't been alleged to be the shooter. So that, again, there's really no basis to tie him to any sort of murder. Really been a passenger in a car when a shooting occurs does not automatically make you a participant in that shooting, even under the long arm of the felony murder statute. The same way that he would have to be involved in a felony, those things still apply. Like I said, there's been no evidence that he encouraged, aided, abetted, participated in any sort of felony. He's not alleged to be the driver, not the financier, not alleged to arrange any sort of transaction. Most that seems to be alleged is that there was some sort of communication with the person. Merely communicating with a person without more does not tie you into the scene. There's been nobody that's alleged to have implicated him as playing any part in that transaction that is alleged to be the basis of the felony murder. So for those reasons, Your Honor, I would ask that all charges be dismissed against Mr. Carter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Schoolcraft?
Your Honor, I would reiterate some of what Mr. Rogers said, in that as far as Mr. Gomez, it's clear he's not the shooter. 6 inches shorter, 5 or 6 inches shorter. He may have been present at the scene, but again, mere presence is not sufficient. And I realize this is not a trial, that the standard of evidence or the threshold necessary to bind a case over is less. My client may have used his Instagram to set up a drug deal, which obviously I think is one of the charges against him, using a telephone communication device. But he certainly didn't participate in the murder. There's no evidence at all that he participated in the murder. And so for that reason, Your Honor, we would ask to dismiss the murder case against my client or dismiss all charges because there's no proof that he committed any crimes.
Thank you.
Judge,
Go ahead.
the state, we were asking all the charges for both defendants to be bound over to Superior Court. Based on the testimony from Detective Bastier, he was able to determine that Mr. Carter and Mr. Gomez were there at the scene through the use of their communication devices. He testified as to the text messages and Instagram messages between the decedent as well as the individuals. There was video surveillance that was set up at the victim's home where Detective Bastier was able to view the actual incident with the individuals who were in the car, who got out of the car, the individual who was the alleged shooter of Mr. Mancera, and then the vehicle fled and was abandoned and later found, I believe he said several days later, in Independence Park. Even the statements provided by Mr. Carter and Mr. Gomez placed both of them at the location. And given that with the communication between the individuals with the decedent, the information that we know they were there at the scene, we believe that at this stage, that certainly is enough to support all of the charges being bound over to Superior Court.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. I find that evidence is sufficient to bind these three charges over for both of the accused. At a minimum, on the murder charge under Part 2 of crime theory, the use of the communications facilities and the criminal attempt to violate Georgia Controlled Substance Act. So these three charges we bind over for both of the accused to the Superior Court of Clayton County.
Thank you, Judge. And can Detective Bastier be excused?
Yes, I already released them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm so accustomed to asking, just making sure. Thank you, Judge. And I believe the juvenile, they have him at the jail, that they're excused as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. Mr. Gomez can go back to his, I'm assuming he's at the Department of Juvenile Justice.
And Judge, I guess I needed to, we're still live on YouTube, but I know Mr. Schoolcraft, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stanley, I don't know if he asked to speak to Mr. Williams or if that's, if we know we're doing a hearing, because I just wanted to go ahead and get just the next officer just on standby, so we'll be ready to go.